Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
How have things been for you?
It's early morning here, so I'm still a little in dreamland. I woke up, alarm was on 5:45, so now it's 6 o'clock. I've been busy. The children have been with me this last week, so I've been pretty busy. So it was hard for me to get on a meeting, but I could feel like also a resistance to get on a meeting because it's like well, there's some voice in me. I can see it. It's like saying things that why I don't want to go on a meeting. Like two things I said. One thing was like, well, when you talk one on one with someone, it's easier to share, and when there's many, it's like feel like ashamed of things or stuff you don't want to say. And then the other thing that the voice said was like, well, you're never honest. Whatever you say is there's always it's not really true because there's so many things, like there's so many parts in you or something, and it's like it's not true. And then there's like maybe another voice saying, and maybe you're saying that to like to be perceived in a certain way, or it's uh, like there's some kind of identity like wanting to be maybe not like like doing it intentionally, but like there's some underlying thing trying to be with identity, trying to be seen. And then there's like another part of this, like watching all the thoughts going on. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I
I get it.
yeah,
It's all there, isn't it? Yeah, for sure.
still there.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you can always make an appointment with me to do a one-on-one. We can do it that way as well. But there is value in doing it in the group, and that of course is exactly the things that you've just mentioned. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
was I was thinking. Well, there's value in the group because then um I mean the point is not to get rid of these things, but like we've talked about, to see them and
yes,
maybe go deeper and see what's underneath. And
yep.
yeah,
And you get there by facing them, as that's the thing. Yeah, by
but I'm very
accepting.
split because I want to, and I try to I face see them and also try to go deeper. But then there's these other parts saying, like, I guess from all watching all the non-dual way things over the years, like it's like watching, but going deep, it's not really real. It's just thoughts all the way down. And it's like, I don't know if it's like not pessimism, but something. The thing that's watch is like the thing that goes deep wants to go when you want to go deeper. It's like coming to something more real. But then there's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else saying, well, it's not really real. And so it's like being in I never know if someone asks me how are you doing. It's like impossible to say. So there's like one part we don't know anything, but it's not really the real unknowing. It's more like this doubt, I would say. And then there's another part who wants to go be real and honest and go deeper. So it's like those two things are
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
in. Yeah.
yeah. And it's kind of amazing and wonderful if you can recognize that those things can coexist and they're not in competition with each other. And they're all true. They're all right. I mean, you want to get to something real, but it's not real. Of course, it's not real. It is stories all the way down. But on the other hand, there are stories that lead to suffering, and there are stories that don't.
Yeah. At times it can feel very confusing, like especially with relationships and love. Like my girlfriend, I love her and I really care for her and I really appreciate the time. Like all these feel true to her. And then there's another part saying, "Well, are you?" Well, it doesn't say it, but it's like wondering, "Are you sure this is what is love?" I mean, it's like sometimes I can be in a little bad place where I'm just unsure if I love my parents or I can be like it can be unsure about anything like yeah, and that can be a little hard
Yep,
to
yep, yep.
uh,
I get it. I get it. But on the other hand, it can be equally true, and it is
mm,
for me that not am I unsure about lots of things, but that I feel very happy that I don't know about lots of things. So not knowing for me is a sense of freedom.
yeah and I mean I was thinking about this a while ago and I was like because what you're speaking about is this I call it the mystery of life. You can be in the
Yeah,
mystery of life, and it feels very big. And I was always thinking to myself, like mystery of life, this in the unknowing. There's you can see the mystery of life or the confusion and appreciating the mystery of life is like two sides of a coin. One side is like resistant and negative, and one side is more open and
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the side
playing
that's
with it.
confusion, excuse me, the side that's confusion, it has stories that says, well, you should know. You should be able to find out. You should, and when I see those stories, I just laugh because they obviously are ridiculous. How can anybody know? It is so complex and so infinitely not understandable. And so
Yeah,
any idea of saying, oh, I should be able to know, it's like saying, well, you should know the intricacies of astronomy or all this stuff. It's just, I mean, in the end, that's all dead knowledge. It's of no value to anybody. But
yeah,
but if there are stories that say you should know, and that gives you a sense of confusion or whatever variation of that it is, then they're the things that we need to take notice of. So there is some part of you that says it's possible you can know. So to say you should know rests on a foundation that says it's possible to know.
yeah.
As soon as you examine that possible to know, you realize that, of course, it's not. All you can have is more stories.
Yeah,
But the feeling is there. The feeling is it is what it is. It is there. So to look at what that feeling is about is your answer through to out of the confusion, but through the confusion, right through the middle of the confusion and out the other side.
yeah. And I can see how that belief I should know and or I can know and I should know and that's like in the body. It's a fight. I could feel a tension in the body, like a fight.
Yep.
Uh, and there's a hopelessness and a despair because it's like uh, well maybe I was investigating the relation to my father, like being young and him. I there was like him being upset about things, or I could see he was stressed or sad, or mostly stressed. And then at times when I felt he blamed me. Well, first there was like a pain, seeing pain in others or in him. Uh, like I guess feeling, yeah, like feeling pain, just seeing pain in him. And then when I felt he blamed me, it's like a confusion, like because there's so many things you learn from your dad, and you're like wired to learn. So when he said, I felt he said it was my fault, there was like a confusion, like this is
Yes.
not true, but
Yeah.
I have to help him. So maybe if it's true that I changed and there's something is wrong with me, I would help him. And then, but I don't know anything. But then there was like a fight, and then it's like to accepting that belief that okay, maybe there's something is wrong with me. There was like a pain and a fight.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, so I feel it's in the body. Those early beliefs for me are in the body. Like it can go into like not panic, but like some kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. So
yeah. So
do you recognise that moment, you know, so
yeah,
you were able to see that it wasn't your fault, what the pain that he was experiencing. You were able to see that. Yet when he blamed you, your desire to help him meant that you had to lie to yourself,
yeah,
right? So we have what they call cognitive dissonance. We have this contradiction that we have to override what we know is true and accept something that we know is not true in order to get the kind of outcome that we think is right. So do you
yeah,
get that? This was a point where you got divorced from yourself. This is the point where
yeah.
you lost authenticity.
Yeah, and I feel it has to do with yeah, because when you're a kid, I felt always this, when you're learning words and learning things, like first I was very confused, like how is that a car, or how is it, like I didn't understand how it could be. But then it's like, well, I have to learn, like in order to first, it was like hard to pretend that first I like had to really pretend to know, to play or to pretend that it was like that. And after a while it got very easier, and when it got easier I felt some kind of power in this pretending
Yeah.
game. But in
So
the beginning it was
what
very,
you were doing at this stage is that you were already able to distance yourself from the truth that you knew.
yeah, yeah.
Have you seen and done that meditation that I put up?
Yeah, the healing of inner child.
Yes, that's it. That's the
Yeah,
one. Yeah, yeah. That would seem
yeah.
very relevant to me if you are able to. Um,
I've been doing that with that guided meditation and other versions. So I've been doing that for half a year, like this. You go into the feel the pain as a child, and then I take the role to give it space and heal it, and
yes,
to give it what it didn't got back then. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it feels artificial, but sometimes it's nice, and I feel I'm able to, yeah, it has value to do it. So I've been doing that a little bit. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
I suspect that we could talk about that in more depth about just what you're feeling as you do that in order to get value out of it. But yeah, look, book a session with me, just a one-to-one session with me, and let's explore that then. I think that'd be a good idea. Um,
yeah.
you know, you've got yeah, you've there's a kind of a problem here, and that is that you know what you know about this stuff. What you know, instead of relieving you of this, it actually becomes a way of escaping it.
Yeah,
So you kind of know too much, but on the other hand, no, we've just got to change where you know. We've got to get it down into a body knowing rather than just into the mind knowing. And I think you're certainly open to that. So yeah, let's have a go at doing it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you know about your father, you know about your relationship. You see that, so that's an amazing thing to be able to see that moment when you had to lie to yourself in order to get on with him. Right? That's an incredible, incredible insight to have that so clear as you do have. Right? So that's something we'll use for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And recognize that. Keep in mind that the stuff that's a little bit uncomfortable, that's painful, that's the stuff that you need to go towards in order to get through this. Not escape it, yeah, but go towards it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. How have you been, Marcus?
Been pretty well, thank you. Just thought I would check in again tonight. Still, I guess don't really have anything other than I've still just been looking into that feeling of there being a separate self here, and kind of going back and forth between the process of looking at what the me or what the I thoughts reference, and not finding anything there, but then quickly moving back into I guess everyday life where it starts to where that that sense of being separate, or needing to protect yourself, or be fearful of what life might bring kind of comes back in. Um, so it's kind of this
Yep, yep. So
uh,
are you seeing it when it comes back in? Are you seeing it reaffirm itself?
uh, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I see it right when it happens, but I'll notice soon afterwards. Sometimes almost in just the way uh if I'm kind of holding my breath, or tense, or just more reactive, or um,
Okay, so is this a new thing where you catch yourself doing that? You seem to step out of what's going on in order to observe what it is.
um, I don't think well, I mean, it's new over the last few months since I've been working with Elad, I guess, to where he's really
Hmm.
encouraged me to pause all the time, anytime that I thought comes up. And I guess I'm to the point to where it's to the point to where when there's looking to find it, it's not there, but it just doesn't feel, it feels more like a recognition of the absence of a self, rather than an embodied feeling of there not really being a separate self.
Yeah, okay. So you get that there is old habits that are there and that will continue to assert themselves until they lose any potency, which happens by continually reaffirming that they have no validity.
Hmm.
But you're not you the it's this that's a really important one because it's the way you do that. It's not a case of telling yourself something again and again and again until you believe it, but rather accessing the knowing that even get to go look for a self because you know that you're not going to find one is not worth the effort. Why bother? Why do you
Right.
keep going back to that fridge looking for the watermelon when you know it's not in there?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of
So,
what you mentioned last week. And I guess I just don't feel like I have enough confidence and the having looked and not seen enough times to where
Yeah,
and it could be something that comes down to expectations. You're about people saying that they have sort of a definitive experience to where
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was very clear, and it doesn't feel like there's been anything like that.
Mm.
So it feels
And you know what?
still.
They may never be. A lot of people don't have that big shift. That definitive feeling that says, "Oh, this is it." It may be that, so if that's, we don't know whether that will or will not happen for you, but those who never do, at some point, look back and see how things have changed for them. And it's only when they do that that they realize that there has been a shift that snuck up on them.
Mhm.
Right? But because it happens in, I mean, we when things, we evolve so slowly that we don't notice the change until you go, oh, how was I 6 months ago? And look at now, and you
Right.
go, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's different. I do respond differently. Yeah. Um, so one of the things that comes to mind that it, I may have already said with you, I don't remember what we've already spoken about, but nevertheless, is that instead of looking for what's not there, I mean, because really, if you can't find, if you've lost your car keys and you look for them and you can't find them, that doesn't mean they don't exist, does it? It just means you simply
No.
haven't found them. So is it the same with a self? If you look for a self and you can't find it, does that mean that there's not one there, or does it mean that you just haven't found it yet? Well, it could be either, couldn't it? Could be
Yes.
both of those things could be possible. So one of the things that I prefer to do, rather than look for a self, I know that's what LU focuses on, but I would say recognize what is there, right? And recognize that what is there is a sense of self, and recognize how that sense of self comes into being. And what it is stories you've accumulated over your whole life. And it's not just the stories, it's the fact that you respond to those stories. So when you say, I am anything at all, I am a man, there's identification. I am a certain age, there's identification. We're defining ourself, and it's the story that we use to define ourselves, but it's how we respond to those stories where the hooks are that give us that sense of self. They're not in the story, they're in the way we respond to the stories. And if you look back, you'll find you've got a pretty thick book full of chapters about Marcus. From when you were as far back as you can remember, you've been adding bits and pieces to that story of Marcus. And so consequently it feels very real because we have no doubts about the fact that they're actual. And then we respond to them. And that gives us a sense of self. Now, those stories may be absolutely accurate, but they are just stories. So we're not really talking about the stories being wrong or shouldn't be there. What we're talking about is our relationship to those stories. So we respond to them in a certain way when we have a certain relationship. If we have a different relationship, we respond to them in a different way. You see, and then those people who feel insecure will grasp tightly. They'll hang on to those stories in a big way, and so they're a lifeline to them. Right? Those people who are fairly secure in themselves can be fairly relaxed about the way they do that. If if there's a recognition underneath that they are just stories and that they have little meaning, I don't know how accurate that would be, but if but our the strength of grasping onto them is what this is all about. The need to hold on to them, or if we can accept them as just stories. So, I mean, the story here was when I was young, I had red hair. So what? I don't have red hair now. Well, my pubic hairs are still red, but how relevant is that to anything? You know what I mean? The fact
Right,
that I had red hair is totally irrelevant. It's just, but it's a part of a story. So there are no
right.
hooks there. You know, there are no hooks. There's no hanging on to that kind of thing. But if we come into the present and we start describing things, then we're more likely to get closer to having a good reason to hang on to our relationship with those stories. So that's what it is. And it's a sense of self. And it's really important to people frequently say, oh, there's a sense of self there. And they say it like what they really mean is there's a self there. Well, there's a difference between a self and a sense of self. And it's important to appreciate that that sense of self can be there. And remember, if I don't know if I spoke about it, but remember, go to the magician show and watch him saw a woman in half, right? And there's definitely the senses are telling you that he's sawing a woman in half. But there's no hooks into that story because you know it's a magician show and there's no blood and there's nobody jumping up shouting stop. No, nobody's calling the ambulance or the police because it's a
Mhm.
magician show. So it's not the story, it's the hooks into it that are the important thing. And the hooks into your sense of self should be a bit like you've been to that magician show. Every show he's put on this week, you've been there, and on the fifth time you've been there, you go, what? You know what? This is really boring. I couldn't be bothered with it anymore. Well, that's how you'll get with your sense of self. Right? It's an illusion that will continue simply because of all of the conditions that add up to make that illusion. But you know what? How when you see the shimmer on the road on a sunny day down the other end of the road and you think it's a puddle of water, well, you know it's not, don't you? You don't even think about it
Right.
after you've been through it a couple of times. It's an illusion. Well, a sense of the idea that a sense of self points to an actual self is an illusion. Or no, it's a delusion. If it's believed, it's a delusion. And when we recognize that it's a delusion, it becomes an illusion. But the illusion doesn't go away. It'll continue until we get bored with it. And even then, it might be there if you look. But essentially, who cares? It means nothing. What we're left with, that's what's important. That's where the value of it is. So, yeah. So that's,
So the
yeah, go on.
I was thinking a lot of the stories that I identified with don't seem to be they don't seem to hold
Yeah, the
the
hooks are not
power,
there. Yeah.
but sometimes there's some that come up and it's like even in the midst of it, I can step back and see that it's just a story. It's not about something that's here right now. But it's like I don't know. I guess those are just kind of like what uh, Karsten was talking about, the deeper stories or the
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true that there will be some stories that have hooks that don't seem to let go. And that is because the stories that we experience are not the real stories. They're stories on top of stories. And it's the stories underneath that we need to get the hooks out of in order to release the other one. And so there certainly can be that it's more than just what I would call a remnant of a self that's there and those remnants, they'll go when you recognize them. They don't tend to come back because it's a belief gets changed as soon as you see it. But those ones that hang on, they're sitting on top of something else. So that's we need to dig a bit deeper, and that's what
so you're
yeah.
saying it could be just a gradual process of more and more of those hooks into stories about identity or whatever it is
Mm,
loosening up and falling away until
yep, yep.
eventually they're just not, they just don't hold the power
Yeah.
anymore.
Yep. So I could say, well, you know what? Every story at this level is just going to be a load of crap, and you don't need to believe any of them. But that's offering you another belief, and that's not the way to
Hmm.
get there. The way to get there is to recognize that those stories don't hold water. They're all leaky buckets. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would think by now we'd see the pattern because there's been so many that have been let go of, and it just every time that happens, it feels like such a, you know, a weight off or a relief or just an opening up of space for something to come in. But I guess, and I guess what I've expected would be for at some point kind of the foundation to fall out from a lot of the other stories, but instead it seems like it's more of a one by one by one,
Yeah, well,
process.
there is a tipping point as well. That'll happen as well. Yeah, and so here's a really interesting one, right? The kind of final story, the one that the one that'll take you over that tipping point. That final story is the story of I am awake or I am not awake. So and recognize it is a story, it is just a story. So what it means is not much in a way, but you can imagine that if you have a story that I am not awake, then that it has all sorts of stories hanging off it, like I am still seeking, I am still looking for something to change. Something is not here that I want here. And that something is always grasped for in the future, right? So I'm looking for this thing that is going to change me. Well, while ever you're a seeker, that's what's going on, right? So there's the story of I am not awake. Now, guess what? When the story of I am awake seems to have some legitimacy for you, right? And it doesn't mean there's a badge. It doesn't mean an ego swelling. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means this describes a perspective, a way of looking at things, right? So when there is a story that I am awake, guess what? That story changes everything. All of a sudden, you're not looking for things in the future. You're not looking for something to fill a hole. You're not looking for something to change you. It doesn't mean that you stop looking at what turns up and accepting that what turns up will be something new. So looking for changes into curiosity. You cease to become a hunter and you become an explorer. There's the difference with those two stories. And so when you
Hmm.
get to that, I am awake, you all of a sudden you go, you know what? That's pretty much a load of crap, that story. Well, there's no such thing as awake, right? But what it does describe is your attitude about what's not there yet. It says, you know what? I've got the tools. I've developed enough skill to be able to look at the shit that turns up and make value out of it. That's what
Hmm.
that story brings about. Whereas the first story, the I'm not awake story, the I'm still a seeker story, goes, oh, there's something missing. I've got to find this. I've got to find what it is I need to be able to. And it's a grasping and a seeking and somewhat desperate too. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely sense like a fear around letting go of the story of I'm not awake because it's like,
Yep.
I mean, if I am awake and this is how things are, then there's no hope, right? Because it's uh
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that one a few times. Yeah. Even from others here, I've heard that one. If I am awake, this is shit. Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, there does feel like there's like less of the sense of like desperation or grasping and more of just
Yep.
um I don't know, there's still definitely a fear because it seems like when I get to a point where I feel like, oh, maybe it is better now, then life has a way of just coming and like bowling me over,
Yeah,
um, or throwing something at me that just kind of like
yeah,
what I was saying before. It's like even in the midst of it, I'm looking at it and knowing that it's a story, but it's still just
yep,
it's hard. So
yeah,
there's a fear of like letting go of the
yeah.
the
And
grasping
I
for
get
something.
that. I have no worries. I have no difficulty getting that because I remember it from myself. Even though it was a fair while ago, I can remember that. Whatever. But let me say, when you do get to say, even tentatively, you might say, well, maybe I am awake. It will be with a question mark at the end. There will be humility for a little while, and the humility will always be there, I guess. But there will be a certainty about it at a certain sometime. So when you're awake, you'll know you're awake. So if you've got to ask the question, "Am I awake?" You're not awake. Simple.
Right.
So that when you're awake, you'll know you're awake. But it will also you will be hesitant to say it out loud because it will seem, I don't know, it will seem like a superiority thing or some a great achievement or something like it will appear
Mhm.
the way it's not. So it'll be the only place you'll say it in a reasonably relaxed place will be somewhere like this where other people know what you're talking about. But if you were to say it in the living room at a Christmas party, you would just it wouldn't go down well with you or with anybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's not a either or thing either, like p- people will have frequent experiences, you might call them mini if you like, mini experiences of being awake and then not, then being not awake again. Right? So it's like it can happen that we have moments of that and then we'll go, oh, but and then we'll bring up a story about why we're not awake. And that's the doubt thing that comes along, So um, frequently when people have doubt, the first question I'll ask them is, do you doubt whether there's a self there or do you doubt whether you're awake? And they'll go, oh no, I'm pretty sure there's no self there, but I don't know about being awake. I don't, so doubt. It's an interesting one. Really, really
Mhm.
interesting. Um, and again, you don't solve doubt. Doubt is like the sense of self, where you just get bored with it in the end. It's not like it's something you're going to fix. So doubting is not a measure of whether you're awake or not. A lot of people who are awake have doubt,
Mm.
and they just it takes a while for them to get bored with that and move on. And once you've no longer got your attention on that stuff, you can move on more with the idea of recognizing the opportunities when shit turns up. Yeah. And it will continue after you're awake for sure. Yeah. And even some of the really deep stuff will come up after you're awake. Often it probably does mostly come up after you're awake, actually. Um, but sometimes it gets in the road, and that's the reason, that's what we need to look at to become awake. But essentially, being awake, there's a lot of different ways we could describe it, but one of the ways that I would use that seems helpful is to say we recognise that we have the tools in order to cope with whatever turns up. Cope with is not a good way to put it. In order to make the most of, in order to be productive with whatever turns up. That might be a better way to put it. And so it's not about stuff not coming up. It's about having the tools, if you like, to make use of it when it does.
Yeah. Or just not being afraid of what might come up because you're not
Yeah. Well, even contrary to not what being afraid of what might come up, but rather looking forward to what might come up as an opportunity. That's something you will experience as well. I can't say I remember a tipping point with that one, but for as long as I can remember, it's good when shit happens. It's not pleasant necessarily, but well, it's
Yeah.
not unpleasant either these days. But it's good when it happens. Yeah, it's useful.
Yeah, last week you said you take it back to the lab.
Yeah,
When you get frustrated at the at the end of the day or whatever, you kind of see what happened.
May is going to be really at some point, convincing her that she's awake is going to be a bit of a trick because she's got this analytical mind that adds up things and puts a value next to them, and yeah,
So I
she'll be
think
awake a long time before she thinks she is. Go on.
I think I'm a bit tired now, and I think a lifestyle is sneaking up on me, and I really need these 2 weeks of rest and staying home.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway, when you say all this, I do have tools. I know I have tools. But being tired now, sometimes I don't apply them, and there is a week ahead of me now, 3 days, when there will be a lot of things to manage.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm a little bit anxious. Will I have time? Will I do it right? Will it be okay? There are my lessons coming up tomorrow, so it's
Yeah.
my moment.
Yeah. So there are a couple of
But
things that you said in there that are things, life buoys I can throw you kind of thing. And one of them is you can't do it wrong, right? So there's no such thing as doing it right. It is what it is what it is. So you can't do it wrong, right? And if you apply the label of wrong, then that's wrong. If you apply the label of wrong, it's wrong to do that. But that's I'm joking at the same time as I'm serious. You get what I mean. But it's what's also wrong about it is that you miss out on the opportunity that it offers you when you say it's wrong
Right.
because you're too tied up in how it should have been rather than making use of what did come along.
Mm.
Yeah. And the other thing is that being tired, being really tired, really exhausted is like being sick as well. Then we get triggered a lot easier under those circumstances.
Although I wanted to say, whatever happens, I see that the level of triggering is not the same anymore.
Right?
I mean, really, really unpleasant things that happen to me, like my car breaking down on my way to the airport or something. Uh, it
Yeah,
sorts itself out.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't blink. I didn't blink, really.
That's pretty awake. Yeah.
So,
I mean, no matter how upset you get, it's not going to get it fixed any quicker, is it? In fact, it
no,
could
no,
it could retard it even, Yeah.
yeah. So, however back I fell, it's not the same level. It's not the same depth of falling back, falling down.
Hmm. Yeah.
No. And
And another thing that came up for me when you were talking was what one other thing I've already mentioned to you, but I don't know if it's sunk in, but let's try it. And that is that doing this stuff is not separate. It's not a separate thing. It's not something that you go and do by yourself or you do apart from your work or your normal daily life. It is about your daily life. It is about what's going on now, always in the now. And although we might feel like we need to be able to give it our full attention, it's good practice to be able to have only one part of the mind or attention focused on it, and let the rest of it go on doing what it needs to do. That's, yeah.
I saw it a bit yesterday. Well, on a plane, I have the choice to work, to observe something, or or just to take my in-flight entertainment and not doing nothing. So tired as I am, I took my music and I just listened to music. But at the same time, there were songs, one after another, and one of them came up, and I thought to myself, oh, this is one that made me. I have my internet nickname after this band and everything. So it made me 30 years ago. And then, oh, this is how a big part of my story came to be. So I decide not to do anything, but still things come, insights come, as small as they are. But
Yes, yes. I love that. When you go, oh, that, oh, that's just great. That is so beautiful. That is,
yeah, and
that is, that is you changing.
yes, yeah.
Mm.
And another small one, there are people sitting around me, and we are, like David Bowie says, sitting in a tin can, all squeezed in. And I'm watching these people, and my thing that I cannot understand, that everyone is conditioned. But at one point I think, oh, these are all people, they all came with their stories, and their stories made them. And if they interact, they will interact in a way from the stories that made them. They cannot help it. So I'm on my way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you see that nobody has control. They all just,
No,
they're all just
no,
response monkeys all the way. Yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of easier to see that they don't have control than to see that I don't have control.
yeah.
That's a little bit harder to wear. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. See, you have the tools that I was talking about. You do have those tools
I
now that
do.
you're able to use. Yeah.
I do, and I know.
Sorry, I don't want to turn on the camera because my husband is still sleeping in this room. And but I wanted to say, when I came here and I looked at Maya, and it was the first thing. Wow, she looks so young today.
I'm in Zagreb now, and there's a whole other setup here, and there's just by accident a lamp that looks like influencer light. It's, I think, 20 years old or something. It's not meant to do that, but everything's different around me. I'm not at home now. I am at home. My dad thinks I'm home. I think I'm home elsewhere.
Yeah, I was wondering, is it the magic of white t-shirt?
It's light. It's light.
It's probably everything. Yeah, it's probably everything, and the lighting, but yeah, definitely maybe your expressions. Who knows? Who knows? These things are too complex and too subtle to be really. But intuition says, ah, yes, there's a feeling of openness in you that is more obvious today. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
feel you are more relaxed, and
We'll see next
I
time. We'll see on Saturday.
Maybe it's because you're tired.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I'm tired. I let everything go. I have no choice but letting everything go. Everything's a pun now. There's one thing I really need to see. There's one thing I really want to see. This is how the language peels off from perception. I need to see it from a linguist perspective. I really need to see it. How the language is apart from perception.
Well, what comes to mind is that you walk along the edge of the cliff of labels, and as you're walking, you're looking at the ground beneath you, and you can see all these labels that define what it is you're looking at. But they also mean that what you're looking at is always at a distance, if you like, even if it's the distance between your eyes and the ground. That distance is enough for you to not notice anything that's smaller than a millimeter. Everything is only seen from that distance, and that's what labels do for you. But if you look over the left, there's a cliff face, a cliff edge that you're walking along, and down there are no labels, but everything is really, really detailed. And it's down under that level of labels where the language loses its influence. I mean, it still does have some influence, but it gets less and less down underneath those labels. So whatever you label, you know that you're reducing it to a simplistic level in order to put a label on, that it ignores the detail of it. It ignores all of the aspects of it, all of the characteristics that are included in that label. So a lot of labels, it's amazing how our language has meant that a lot of labels can even have a moral overtone. You know, the overtone of it's good or it's bad, or it's better or worse, or that kind of stuff. Now labels, and so you think a label is something fairly objective about an object, but it includes a whole lot of things that we've come to understand through our society and our culture about that kind of thing. So I don't know if that is where you're looking, but that is a possibility for you to see in the drop-off, that underneath the label there are details that can't be expressed in any language. But some languages, I mean, Arabic, as I understand it, I don't really know this to be true, but it was an understanding I have that Arabic has 5 times as many adjectives in its language as what English does. So there are much more variations in terms of description than what there is in English. But then again, you take an artist who is really into color, and you know, most of us will have maybe 7 or 8 fairly primary colors that we know of, and they'll have names for 50 times that many colors. You know, so there won't be just a red for them. There'll be all these variations of red. So we get out of the common language into more niche languages, more niche areas of language with things like that. But even that, it simplifies things to a fair degree when you talk about that. So, you know, the transition from one red to another probably doesn't have any words for them. It's either this or that kind of thing. And again, that's a perceptual thing. It's not a factual thing, because any color, as just using color as an example, any color is going to depend on the lighting. And so it's one color with this light, and it's another color with that light. In daylight, it's going to have a different color to an artificial light. And if it's a yellow globe, it's going to be different to an LED globe with a blue spectrum light. and so on and so on. And all of that stuff is just not there in language. It's too subtle. It's too complex already. Is that what you were meaning? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is me philosophizing, so
Mm.
I'm
I was
preparing a
gonna
lesson.
say, I'm sorry, Maya, go ahead.
No, I'm preparing a lesson on this, so I thought a lot about this.
Mm.
I just felt like sharing something that was a big issue for me as someone who liked or loved to intellectualize and understand everything around me. Is that we as humans, or as persons at least, have this inherent uncomfortableness of not knowing. And it's good to understand a lot of the stuff that we're discussing, but it also kind of creates or it perpetuates what we're actually trying to not do so much.
Yeah.
Right. So the need to understand, the need to know, the need to like intellectualize, it keeps us in the conceptual world, and that's where we want to not be bound by.
Mm.
So for me, who like really wanted to know every single detail and felt like the answer lies in understanding this intellectually, it was a big trap for me. So yeah, I just wanted to share that and point that out.
I'll be following you in the trap, right in the trap.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do that because, like I said, it was really uncomfortable for me to not know. Like, even looking at this plant in front of me, there's an automatic movement of kind of labeling or knowing it, and I watch the mind do this, and then as I watch it and become aware of that movement, I also can go into not knowing it anymore, or not knowing the label, just looking at it as it.
Well, would you say knowing the experience of it?
Yes, that's more correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I actually get where you're coming from. And I immediately jump back to something we spoke about before, about keeping this at what we do here in these meetings at an experiential level. And the value of that is certainly undeniable. And it can seem like, and I don't know if I'm apologizing here, but it can seem like we're intellectualizing something if we lose the connection between what we're talking about and our experience. Now, I don't feel for a moment that I did with Maya, that it was her experience about language. Being a linguist, like, it's particularly interesting for her, that stuff, but she is relating it back to her experience. And the same thing with Marcus. What we were talking about was not just some theoretical thing about being awake, but rather relating to his experience about that, how he relates. So they're the links into those things, but it can easily seem like we're just intellectualizing. So I don't know whether you were feeling we were doing that again or not, but yeah.
Oh no! This came up because of something Maya said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I get
So
what you said, and very relevant. I
yeah,
like it. Yeah, yeah. We do. It comes back to that thing where the brain, being a predictive organ, creates what it thinks is going on very quickly, and then we relate to that rather than to the actual thing. Right? So the
yeah,
moment you're thinking of the label for that plant, you're not really seeing the plant. You're in your head. And
yeah,
when you
exactly.
recognize that's what's happening, whoop, all of a sudden there's this experiencing. And how can you put into words the experience of a certain kind of green, the depth of green? If it's a green, I can't see the plant, but I'm imagining a fiddle leaf fig, with a wonderful green leaf, and the experience of that green and the experience of the shape is profound, absolutely profound stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you get used to mm, moving into that space, life becomes so much richer. So you don't
Yep.
need to grasp at understanding, and like that's mm, that used to be a sort of subtle kind of entertainment for me,
Mm,
to
mm.
kind of intellectualize, but
Well, it is. I mean,
stopping that.
yeah, how big a deal do we put on young kids when they're first learning to talk? When they can identify cat, dog,
Yeah,
mum, dad, whatever, we just congratulate them and make such a big deal out of the fact that they've accurately put a label on something. This is the way
yeah,
we learn. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Yeah.
But my problem is, and I know it's impossible. I know it's impossible, but this is a thought. This is thinking that I don't have direct experience, that I only think in language, that I'm so much in language, I'm so much in labels that I don't have direct experience. But it has to be that I have, because otherwise I wouldn't live in the world, right?
That's a that's a really interesting twist, isn't it? Really incredibly interesting. I I intellectualize that I have a direct
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. I'm, and I do know that I'm so much in my head. And I do know that it's too much being in my head.
So when you oh, I don't know if this is the right way to put it. When you switch from being in your head to experiencing something more directly, do you recognize that happening? Is there a celebration when with that recognition?
There is recognizing, not a big celebration. But uh, the moments for when I believe to have direct experience, I'm not sure this is it. This is how it's done. When watching head
Okay, yeah,
people sitting on the
yeah,
plane.
okay, yeah. No, all right. Yeah, that if
You
this is
don't
how
drink
it's
the
done,
water.
got me. I don't know how to react to that. Is this is
but
You
how
that
it's
cannot
is
done?
swim
that is just
of
a
the level
thought,
that
right?
sorry.
I was going to say, when you're having a direct experience, and then what it sounds like, then a thought comes up and says, I don't know if this is how it's done.
Yes,
So
yes,
before that, you were actually there, and then
yes,
you got hooked by that thought.
yes.
Yeah. So then
So
it's just
here's a
let
really
that thought go and go back to direct experience. Don't follow it.
Okay.
don't yeah, don't follow the content of it, what it's
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But do you get that a thought is a really interesting experience? We can have direct experience of the fact that a thought occurred, but when we do that, we're not involved in the content of the thought.
Okay.
Yet the content is the carrier.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a kind of an inbuilt paradox there, because without the content, there is no thought. And yet we can have experience of the fact that a thought occurred without engaging with the content of the thought. So when you have the experience that a thought occurred, that's a direct experience. Yet here, really interestingly, direct experience almost always will only occur to us as a memory. So it's not really a direct experience. It's a memory of a direct experience. But you can imagine the idea that a direct experience happens. Say, let's say you experience a touch on the back of the neck. By the time you become aware of that touch, it's in the past, and what you're actually aware of is a memory of that touch, not the touch itself. So the touch itself is so instantaneous that it's almost always immediately followed by story, and the story will be, there was a touch. And then another story, maybe it's a mosquito that's landed on my neck. And then there'll be a, let's do something about it kind of thing. So a whole sequence of things comes up. But we're talking about a time frame that's almost instant. It's really tricky. So any direct experience is, by definition, that experience that happens before thought turns up to describe or explain what's going on. And you can experience how quickly that happens every moment of thing, you know.
And also about intellectualizing things, especially like you have shared earlier, Maya, that you have sort of a identity created around that. It's going to be, well, my experience is that identity needed to drop. Like seeing yourself as a person that has, you know, is a smart person, or however way you look at yourself. That whole identity needs to be let go of.
I know.
I don't know if you agree with that, Vince, but that was my experience.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So I remember a moment ago you started to describe yourself as a human, and then you changed that to a person, or was it the other way around? I'm not sure which way you did. Yeah. And I love it. I love it because essentially, who knows what we are? You know, again, it's just a language thing, isn't it? We can say, okay, we belong to a genus called Homo erectus, Homo sapien, or something. I'm not exactly sure about that one, but that's a very intellectual definition, isn't it? So what are we actually? Are we actually a human being? Are we actually a person? Well, these are just words with definitions that, you know, that kind of fit and don't fit depending on how closely we look at things.
It's also hard to, like, when we're discussing things like this, to find the correct language. So why I corrected myself, I said as humans, but then I corrected it as a person is kind of similar to how I view, or I could also say character.
Yes.
For me, that means the same, person and character. So a human is kind of the vessel of our beingness. Language is hard.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
So imagine how hard all this stuff is for a linguist.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to say, not speaking one, but several, I'll have to drop them all. Plus the identity.
Yeah.
At
But they
least the
will
attachment
go on.
to it. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, at least the attachment to that identity.
Yes, yeah. And that stuff remains useful in its own way. We just suddenly realise that there's a much bigger world than just that.
Yeah. And realizing that if you identify as a, let's use some other example. If you identify as a moral person, then your behavior is going to kind of dictate how you behave. And if you don't behave in that type of self-image that you have created for yourself, or self-identity, it kind of creates a conflict inside you, right? Which is also a massive source of internal stories. Just because there's a false identity that you have created, that your behavior is kind of modeled after. So looking at our images or the identities that we have is very helpful, I find. I'm still finding stuff lying around.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've developed a story here recently, and what Karsten was talking about earlier was just a huge part of that. And it's like this story might go in a very simplistic level. This story might go something like, all kids up to a certain age have a really uncomplicated, literal way of looking at what's going on, and they see what is actual really easily. They just whatever, and then at some point in their life, I don't know, maybe it's about the age of going to kindergarten or whatever, all of a sudden they're faced with a dilemma where what's demanded of them is to deny what they see as actual, to modify that in order to fit in with other people, parents in particular, but also siblings and older peer groups, older peer people, all of that stuff. And that's a really really traumatic point in their life where they have to suddenly go, I'm wrong. But they know they're not. I read a thing recently about the cost of lying. Lying when we lie, and I read into it about lying to ourselves as much as lying to anybody else. But when we lie, that is a huge drain on the brain energy. When we lie, we have to remember so much stuff that we're working really hard, and it consumes a lot of energy to do that. Whereas when we are able to relax and just be absolutely authentic and truthful, hardly any energy is involved. It's really easy going, you know?
And I
And
would
people lie to
say,
themselves.
would that also include, Vince? Like, because I would think identifying as a separate self with all these sorts of self-constructed, mentally constructed images about who one is also a lie.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you're
It's
constantly in a lie, which drains your
constantly working
energy.
to maintain that
Yeah.
lie. Absolutely. Yes. Huge effort. Everybody gets exhausted with that one. Yeah.
I was thinking about what you say now, and it was like an interesting thought for me came up that kids, or when I was young, when I played, it's kind of a pretending, right? You play something and you pretend, and it feels exciting, like you're flirting with a power that, it's very nice to play around, and playing I'm the mom or I'm the policeman, and you kind of believe it, but you don't believe it. But there's some excitement in it. I guess the excitement is with the power of pretending. But when it comes to then, you can fall then into suddenly you start crying in the game because, or it's very hard for you because you believe the lie or you believe the game and the playing, and then it's tiring. And I don't know, with identity in the beginning, it can feel like, well, it felt like excitement and powerful to play with this. I can be something, but then when you suddenly it's real and it's like really a trap, and you feel exhausted. So I was just thinking about this feeling of what you say. It's exhausting to lie to yourself. Is it's a cost. But before that, it's the play, which is kind of you'd be drawn into it in a way.
Yep, yep. So while there's
Yeah.
that play, there's a lot of discovery going on, and that's exciting. That's really good stuff. Yeah. What happens when that other thing? I'm not sure about that. Something happens that changes it. I don't know. So say more about that moment when it ceases to be play and there's that break of some kind that happens. What's your experience with that?
I don't know what it is, but there is a confusion for me. I don't know. In the play, there's no confusion. Maybe but when I believe something, there's this identity, this confusion, and this. Well, I don't know. There is some like about suffering, about pain, about being in confusion or identity. I don't know, when it's just like being lost, something. Yeah.
So I'm having this thought that moment when it changes from the play is the moment something becomes real.
Yeah, you're like trapped in something. It's like you don't know how to get out. It's like, oh, like if you're angry or scared or everything feels wrong, and it's like yeah, something changed. Of course, it's later you get out of it and you say, oh wow, that wasn't a big deal. Like you can, but when you're in it, it seems very hopeless or something. Yeah. Maybe it's that sense of self we're talking about. Like when you play, the sense of the sense of self is kind of, well, it's dynamic. It's like not set. But when I'm in the confusion or the pain, it's like there's something with that sense of self that's
Yeah.
very.
You could even say when you're playing, if you're role playing, if you're being a cowboy or an Indian or mum or dad or whatever, there is no solid sense of self. There is an exploration of possibilities, maybe, but yeah. But when the pain comes, there's very much a sense of self.
Yeah. And I was thinking about the sense of self you said earlier. This is, well, I think it was, we were talking about exploring that there's no self, like you can look for yourself and you don't find anything. You don't find the watermelon. And that's one way I guess I've been doing. And the other way is exploring how is the sense of self coming up. And it's, you know, it's like it's very mysterious because this sense of self is like a shapeshifter. Sometimes I'm identified with my belief. I can have an argument with someone and say, why do you, like, I can defend my belief, and like if they attack or if they are disagreeing with a thought I'm having, my sense of self is I'm the thoughts.
Mm.
And I can defend it. Like, so the sense of self is me, is my thoughts. But then later I can be like sitting there and be angry at my thoughts. Why are those stupid thoughts coming? And my sense of self is like something very different than the thought. And it can go to very older sense of self. If someone like hit my car, I can have the sense of self, my car, I got hit. The car got hit, but I feel like I got hit. So that's this sense of self. It's very shape-shifting. It can be like my football club, it can be me, it can be even like Australia is a stupid country. Like, there's like, then Australia is not me, or it's like this sense of self can just shapeshift to anything. It's very, and the body, sometimes I'm my hand, and sometimes I'm angry at my hand, and I don't feel like me, and then sometimes it is me, and yeah. So this sense of self, that's something I can investigate the sense of self, but it's hard to investigate. If I go to where am I, well, you don't find yourself. It's kind of left in. I'm left in. You know, you don't find yourself. That's it. But the sense of self is something I can like see shape shifting and going around. It's kind of maybe easier to investigate in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And even if you're just being angry at your thoughts, it's easy to imagine that there's no sense of self in there, but there is. And so
Yeah,
we
there
can
is
divide. We can divide. Yeah.
the sense of self is like, maybe it's not clear what it is, but it's like it's not the thoughts. So the sense of is very much here. I'm angry at my thoughts. So I'm defined as what I'm not. You could say. But the sense of self is there, like a frustration about what's going on in my head. And in that frustration, there's a sense of self. Yeah.
Isn't it just a feeling of frustration that you attach to the story that you're playing in that moment?
Yeah. That's the sense of self is like in the story.
No, there's a story. There's a story, and there is a sensation, because you're saying a sense of self. So it's a feeling of self, right? So that feeling you attach, you kind of identify, like you feel like that feeling is me, and then you attach it to a story.
Yeah. The feeling of resisting something, I think. Maybe like if we talk about the game, when we're playing a game as kids, and the sense of self was fluid, but then you can get real. I guess the sense of self, or I don't know if you call it sense of self, but this feeling of me being stuck, it's like in believing that the story in a way. It's very mysterious to me. This what you know, when I investigate what I am. So the feeling that there is experience, and being experienced, I don't know what I am, but it's being experienced by me. But this me is, you know, is where you can never find it. It's mysterious. In arguments, it can be this very strong feeling of me, but where it is, or if it's an argument with myself. So it's like shape shifting. It's like
But do you see that there is an assumption there that you are that being, like you as a being, is somehow needs to have feelings or sensations? That but you're not seeing it as first there's being, and then there is experience of sensations that is not you, but you kind of assume that the sensation that you're experiencing is a part of self. You know what I mean? So you're kind of assuming that when I feel this and I feel that, that's a part of me, but it's actually just a part of your experience.
Yeah, I see that that's like there's an experience, whatever it is, and then it's very quickly added on to after. I guess that there must be a me for experience to happen. Yeah. Or it's I don't know if that's what you meant, but
No. So what before we wake up, well, I will just use myself as an example. So before I woke up, I identified as Marius, which I'm a 38-year-old male, have had these experiences, I have these personality traits, blah, blah, blah. All of these are conceptual, mentally constructed things, right? But if you move everything that is conceptual from experience, you're just left with being.
yeah,
It's just blank being, like a knowingness, right? And on top of that, we there are thoughts and there are emotions and there are thoughts explaining the emotions or trying to make sense of the emotions, and all of that is outside of ourselves, but we kind of assume that because these things are in our experience, they are me. But can't, the me is just thoughts. So thoughts cannot think and thoughts cannot feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think well, I can sense, that this being that we're talking that and this knowing or awareness, you could say, is primary, and all these things are added on. So this I can feel sometimes. Yeah, and then there can be like all these thoughts, and then there can be like some kind of identifying up in there, like the feeling of me is like up in the thoughts. Yeah. But the being, I guess that's the sameness. What is same? Like if I'm happy, if I'm sad, if I'm thinking of me, if there's kind of I forgot about me, there's a sameness to everything, and that's, I guess, the being, which we talk about, like this sameness. It's always there.
Yeah, so if you think, if I understand you correctly, yes. So if you think of your experience void of sensations and thoughts.
Yeah. Then there's just the beingness. I have some interesting thing because I've been investigating sleep and dream, and so for a while, like I meditate, but I do it like while I'm gonna go to sleep, so I can kind of more see my dreaming, and then sometimes there is a sense of the beingness when you go from dreaming to like in the dreamless sleep. I can like it's like I can't remember I've been there because memory is not operating, but I can kind of feel. It's like I when I wake up, I have it's not a memory of being there because there wasn't thoughts, but it was like the really big feeling that I was awake there. There was an awakeness there. Like I could sense that I've been to the being, you could say, in the there. Like that, I've been investigating that for some years. these dreams, falling asleep, and the transition from awake till dream is kind of strange, but also from dream to can kind of sense into that beingness, that you could say. But so I know what you're talking about. This, and in waking life now, I can kind of feel it as what is this always the same. There's something you can't see and touch, but it's in the seeing, it's in the touching, and it's always there, and it's the fundamental, you could say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I like to describe it. It's not never going to be correct, but like if I have to use words, I like to say that I'm just resting my attention. So my attention isn't pointed at anything. It's just resting. That is kind of how, that's the closest I can come to pure being. But I also want to highlight here that the point isn't to be in constant beingness. It's just it helps to sever the identification between the real being and what you seemingly identify with. So if you have an experience that of intense emotions, oftentimes that also follows with some kind of interpretation of why am I feeling this way? And then you're lost, right? So if you can just be with the emotion and see it for what it is, just energy moving through, unless you kind of attach to it and latch to it and want to figure it out and want to understand it, just let it be. Don't even label it as whatever label you want to label it as. Just be with it. Then it becomes something completely different than when we started trying to analyze why we're feeling this way and what this experience is about, and how can I get out of it, and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, that I can see. That's been a trap for me for a long time, which I'm starting to move out of, to not be so hooked into this, trying to figure out how to, of course, mainly would be how to get rid of an unpleasant feeling or sensation. There must be a way to, this must be something I'm supposed to solve. I'm not supposed to feel like this, I need to go into the mental thing. But so that hook has been letting go halfway, you could say, to see the value of being in what without interpreting, just learning from it, you could say, learning it or seeing. Yeah, and then I've been doing that. When you go into intense something painful, if you let go, you learn that there's it changes and it's not what you thought it is. And also there's often a release, and you come into something. Sometimes it can be like a freedom afterwards, like yeah. But then there can be like a trap of, one trap for me then is like, I know that in the past I've gone into pain, and I know that it can release into something very peaceful and nice afterward. So next time I do it, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go into it, but it is with the purpose of that. And then you're back into that. You're doing it for a reason. Yeah, that's a little trap.
Yeah, I totally recognize that. I've done my fair share of that as well. But it's like even labeling it as uncomfortable or whatever negative label you want to put on it, even that kind of sets it up for uncomfortableness.
Yeah, like, the labeling, going on, letting go of the label has to, yeah. Because you're not seeing what's there, you're seeing what you think is there. This is fear.
Yeah, and also there's an attitude behind that as well, right? This shouldn't be a part of my experience.
Yeah,
like if we can look at that attitude with a new lens that says that like both negative and positive emotions or sensations are a part of uh, the human experience. They both are have equal rights to be here. So when we kind of shift that attitude towards what is interpreted as uncomfortable, um, it's kind of like Vince says oftentimes that it kind of it turns into something exciting, like something to
Yeah.
explore, be with.
Yeah, maybe it relates to this play. It goes back to the play in a way, like this discovering. Yeah.
It's a new
It
way
might,
to approach life, right? If you, we've well, most of us aren't haven't kind of removed those labels and attitudes towards those kinds of feelings. But when you kind of switch that perception, life opens up a whole other dimension that we're not used to. It becomes richer. What are you going to say, Vince?
I was going to say it might be helpful now. Again, once again, what Marius was talking about with the attitude is really, really important here. So when I say this, uh, and that is it's a story that I have that the self, the idea of a self, which includes the sense of self, is is armor. It's body armor. It's a way to protect us from something we imagine. Right? So it's not, and don't get lost in the idea that it's wrong for that reason, but rather use that as a doorway, as a portal into something to look at. So if we're being defensive, then we're identifying with the self, and that's just how we're being defensive. And so the idea is that what that does is it should excite curiosity about what, not why, but what is going on. And so we'll go into the body to experience that what and start looking there for what are the stories attached to it.
Yeah.
And I just mentioned that thing about attitude. Just want to add to that um, it, I find that I find many of us hasn't kind of questioned that part of us, like that attitude. Like
Mm.
it's an automatic thing. So when I pointed it out now, it might be easier to kind of question one's attitude about it
Yeah.
what in the experience, because a lot of those stuff, like we have a lot of subtle assumptions and unquestioned beliefs that we don't necessarily always see.
Yep. 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 And some of them, and a lot of those here to us as opinions and value judgments about things, you know, that we don't even see them as that because they seem so normal often. But you know, that thing of this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, all of that stuff, it sneaks in. And I would extend it to as far as to say that that's language does that to a large extent. Language adds the value judgment to what we label in sneaky ways. We don't realise that we're for something or we're against something, and we don't even realise that's the case because it's not the primary thing. We're so involved in what it's about that we don't see that. hanging off it. I mean, I say again and again and again, I say here, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. They're just ideas. That is what it is, what it is. And yet we all do it all the time. It's good that I feel good. It's bad that I don't feel good.
I was thinking about what Mario said about attitude, and I think it's very important. For me, I can, like a major thing, I felt I lost myself at maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, was like the attitude to life was like going from something to play, explore, to survive. Like life was first like something appreciated. It's like an attitude of appreciation or exploring or something. And then what I lost myself, I felt was like the attitude changed to some life was something I had to survive or to
Absolutely.
be
Yeah.
capable of.
Yeah. So now do you get it as an adult now with this with a much wider, wiser perspective? You get that it's not about survival anymore.
Yeah,
Or
in
does
me,
it
I
still
mean,
feel like it is?
many times it feels like that still. Like this is something I have to.
Okay.
Something, yeah. Some, well, not always, but uh, yeah. I wouldn't say I'm back to. Well, sometimes I am.
Yeah, I get it. I
Feel,
get it. Yeah. So it's one of the, I mean, Byron Katie comes to mind with a really, really simple thing. She says, is there right now in this moment, exactly as you are, where you are right now, is there anything wrong?
no, no,
And
there's
that
not.
and that's right. And so that immediately means that any ideas we have are about
Yeah,
something that's not here now.
yeah. I think that attitude, that idea that there's, to drop down was pretty easy for me now, but it's been a habit for so long. Say since I was 9, 10, 11. But that
Yeah.
habit of having an attitude of this is something I have to, it's like, it's just very automatic to
Mm,
be in that
yeah.
state.
Yeah. Well, that's
But
that habit is our conditioning, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
And another word
But
for conditioning that's a bit more brutal is brainwashed. We've been brainwashed.
yeah, yeah. But I see I can drop it also pretty. It's not like very deep. It's very habitual, so it's very easy to go there. But I also can drop down from it pretty. So you know, yeah. So
So the hooks are getting less. That's good.
yeah, yeah.
Mm. I'm interested, Bianca, in what your husband's thoughts were about what he witnessed was going on here. You say he was in the room before with you, watching us, listening to us.
No, he was sleeping, and when he got up, he's going to work, so he
Right.
doesn't
Okay.
pay attention.
So how does he feel about you coming to these meetings?
As he said, if this makes you happy, then I'm happy.
Good man. Good man. Yeah. I go by I say this jokingly but seriously. Happy wife, happy life. Hmm.
I started wondering now about this identity. What is because with me it's someone said that at first when people get to know me, they think I am very intellectual, and after some time they think I am very emotional. And then they say something like you once said that you like to play cold, but you really aren't. And but for me, it's rather that it is playing, but it is also real.
Sure.
But when I play cold, I am really cold. And when I am emotional, I am really emotional.
So that's I don't find any problems with that. I mean, we all, every one of us is all of those things at different times and different circumstances.
So, it was a long time ago when I formed this model of myself combined of different personalities. And just this one shows up, and then this one shows up.
Hmm. You don't feel like one is more you than another, do you?
No, there was a point when I thought that it must be something wrong, that I don't have a boss in this group of
Yeah, yeah.
one to rule them all. No,
Yeah.
it is a self-regulating system.
Hmm. So interestingly, the question of identity comes up when we recognize that we have all of these different aspects of ourselves that appear and don't appear, and others appear and don't appear, and so on. Do you still identify as a something?
Yeah, and this model of identifying they doesn't fit so well.
Yeah.
Because there is identifying, yes, because I
Yeah.
still think that this part is me and this part is
Yeah,
me
yeah,
and this
yeah.
part is me.
So maybe you identify as a committee.
Something like that.
Yeah. And the identification would be, or just to play with this analogy, in the purpose of the committee. The committee has got together in order to achieve some purpose, and the identification would have to do with that purpose more than with the individual characters in the committee. Does that fit?
Oh. It was something I had to work on, because at first there was a lot of fighting in the system, and there were parts who have had completely different goals, and
Yeah. Different members of the committee wanted to be boss.
yeah. So there was this self-loathing and the internal conflicts, and
But now it would seem that that committee is fairly harmonious. That there isn't any outstanding conflicts going on.
yeah, at least there is some reluctant respect.
Hmm. So to take this analogy further, we could say that what we are looking to see happen here is that committee recognizes that the purpose they got together is no longer the purpose, and that they are having their meetings simply because it's enjoyable. There's no agenda. They're just enjoying the cakes on the table or the cups of tea or whatever happens at the meetings. But there's no actual agenda. There's not a purpose per se.
Well, there is. It was a part of work, recognizing that all of them have a goal of keeping me well. It's my welfare. They just had very different ideas of on what would be good for me.
Yep.
So
again, just playing with that analogy, then when they all realize, each one of them realize that nobody needs to be boss, nobody has the job of keeping you well, because by being relaxed and simply enjoying the company, everything is well. That's a lovely Mona Lisa smile you've got there. You do remind me of the Mona Lisa, actually.
There are parts of the committee who strongly disagree with what you said.
Okay. Yeah. Mm.
It's just the committee is there and they came to terms with this, that there is no getting rid of one member who everyone hates. It will be here for
Mm.
good and bad.
Yeah.
We just have to work with each other.
Yeah. There's no choice to not. It just is the way it is. Yes. Mm. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Well, I'm thinking that I'm going to cook my wife a nice tomato sauce to go on some pasta for tea tonight. So that's what's arising up here. Mm. So I'll say good night, good evening, or good whatever time of day it is for you. Good morning, Kirsten. Yes. Okay.
Join, thank you.